Hey, good morning everybody. Jared with J Gross Equipment, Bobcat of Aberdeen. Welcome back to another episode. Today we have a T76 Bobcat sitting here, and we're gonna go over a topic that we get a lot of phone calls on, and that is auxiliary couplers, identifying them, replacing them, overall care, etc. So on the T76, you'll see this Bobcat manifold here. You'll also see this on G series machines, M series machines, and we'll cover what fits what and where you'll see these couplers. Probably one of the biggest, I would say, speed bumps we run into on these parts, and the reason we get a lot of phone calls, is identifying what is what. Now, with the R series, there are some exceptions, so we'll go over that. But with other models like the G series, maybe like a T300, T320, or T770, S770, T76, S650. Once you start mixing all the models, there can be some confusion. So there's a couple ways to identify them, and there's a couple ways to do this. We do have some technical information that we can share with people, and this is double-sided, and it kind of helps break down what's what and identify that. This is maybe we could email this to you, text this to you if we needed to, but there's some quicker ways to identify these. One of the quickest ways is if you own an R series machine, you can immediately eliminate two of these. So if you own an R series machine, it's going to take a 7246799 or a 7246802. These are the only two couplers that you're going to have on an R series machine. So that, makes that easy if you have an R series. Now, if you have an M series, let's say a T650, S650, dozens of other models, you can have any of these styles. So there's two styles here. You could have either one of them. So one easy way to identify those is you can send us pictures via text, email. Sometimes we can identify them if you have a measuring device, right? So I have a real simple digital caliper here. These aren't expensive. And the earlier generation coupler, that's going to start with the 6s. So the 6679837 and the 6680018. Those are we're gonna measure in millimeters. So that older generation of coupler is gonna roughly measure 42 millimeters. So that's one quick way to determine if you have the older generation of coupler. Now, when you move on to the newer generation of coupler that starts with the 7, those are gonna measure 49.8, which is classified as 50 millimeter. So that's one really quick way to identify these couplers if you have a measuring device. Now, this larger one, if we switch over to fractions, just so happens to measure right at about 2 inches. So if you do have a 2-inch wrench and you don't have a measuring device, that's one also quick way to identify it. And a 2-inch wrench will fit it. So another thing we're going to talk about today is there are Bobcat specific tools for these that Bobcat offers. They are they're a good value. They're not terribly expensive. They're light duty just because they don't need to be real heavy because these couplers don't need to be as tight as some people think they are. And then here's the one for the larger coupler, the 50 millimeter coupler. That's going to fit the newer generation of coupler. So these are available for purchase. We do sell these to customers. Customers will kind of keep these in the shop or keep them in their work truck. That way, if they're replacing a coupler on the fly, they got these with them. A lot of our customers will keep a coupler in the shop or in the work truck too. So if they damage one throughout the day, they're not dropping what they're doing and coming in here to grab a coupler. So moving on from there, we'll kind of discuss if you do have a coupler leaking. These are relatively easy to put in. Some people get confused on, you know, what you get. Let's say that they've owned a machine for a year, they've never had to put a coupler in, and they're like, okay, so do I need to take this manifold off? Do I need to take this nut off? And the answer is pretty simple. The manifold stays in the boom, and the coupler and the nut are one assembly. So this, you know, this coupler ring moves on here. We have the female one. This is a 7246802, and so you'll see that this is an assembly, and you'll get this whole piece when you purchase this part, and this whole piece threads into this manifold. So the manifold stays in the arm, and you thread this one out, thread this one in. So moving on real quick, some of the tools you're going to need. You're going to need to clean this surface. That's where we would recommend. If you have air, if you're in a shop, you could blow this off or pressure wash this off. If you don't, let's say you're out in the field working, brake clean works good for that too. You can, you know, wipe it off, however you got to do that. Then moving on, you're going to need a pan of some sort. You're going to lose some oil. As long as the machine is shut off and preferably cooled down, there's going to be little to no pressure in here. There is pressure on this coupler. It does thread in there and apply pressure to it, so that they do feel like there might be oil pressure behind them. Generally there isn't. You know, wear safety glasses if you're not familiar with this job. Wear gloves if you're not familiar with this job. So moving on, we're going to jump into it real quick and kind of show you that. We're going to use the Bobcat tool today, which is just a crow's foot. The rest of this is all pretty standard equipment. You know, we have an extension and a torque wrench here. If you don't have a torque wrench, you don't have to use one. There is torque specifications on here. This one is 54.5 foot-pounds is what they recommend it. So you'd come up here to a machine that is not running, engine shut off, and preferably cooled down, not at operating temperature. You'll break that coupler loose, give it a few turns, and you will feel that there is some spring pressure on that coupler, which it's not a lot of pressure. They do get to a point where you can turn them out by hand, and we're pretty close to that. So I'll grab a little oil pan here so we don't make too big of a mess. So you'll feel some friction from that pressure, and we'll talk about that when you go back in with your new coupler. So there's spring pressure right there. You can kind of see them pushing that spring in. Very easy to push in. And then when you pull that coupler out, that's about how much oil you're going to lose. This machine is not at operating temperature, but it was running just a few minutes ago. We do recommend having your new coupler readily available to avoid losing even this much oil. So we're going to grab our new coupler, and you would just once again set that coupler in there, apply just enough pressure to get those threads on that coupler to meet the threads on the manifold, and you do need to hold pressure on it to get it started. So there, the threads are started, that coupler will stay in there. I'm going to turn it in as far as I can by hand, which is generally you can get it almost all the way, depending on, you know, if it's the machine's warm as far as room temperature, or if it's been sitting out in the cold during the winter. I'm going to grab our torque wrench again, and you'll see that we're not going to have to tighten this a lot with the tool. There, we're bottomed out on that thread. Close, sorry. Okay, so there it's tight, and then we're gonna go, you can hear that torque wrench click, and that coupler's in. So that's all there is to it. So it's a relatively easy job. I would say a large majority of these, our customers are doing them on their own. versus hauling these machines into us for it. There are specific warranty, I'm gonna say parameters for these couplers. There's a smaller time frame and a smaller hour window. The couplers are not covered in warranty for the whole duration of a factory machine warranty, just due to the amount of wear and the amount of damage these couplers can see. So with that being said, another thing that we like to do is discuss with customers is coupler care. These couplers can last thousands of hours if they're cleaned properly, if they're used properly. And the biggest thing we see damage these couplers is attachments. So one thing we recommend doing is when you disconnect your attachment, release pressure on these. These are really easy to release pressure on. You just push on them and you'll see them. You heard that one snap there. So you can kind of see that coupler moves right there. So that coupler does not have pressure on it anymore. Same with this one. The K-strain coupler does not release. These release through a port that actually releases to the K-strain coupler. So that's where that pressure is going when you're releasing that. So the machine can almost never hold pressure to stop you from connecting an attachment. So we'll get phone calls where somebody is saying, hey, I can't get my attachment hooked up. There's something wrong with my machine. There are instances where that happens, but generally 99% of the time, the attachment was disconnected under pressure, the hoses were kept apart, and the attachment has gone through a weather cycle. So let's say you disconnected that attachment, in the machine's oil was 100 degrees, and that attachment is sitting in the sun, and now the ambient temperature of that attachment is 110 degrees if you're in the summer months. When you go to connect that attachment again, it's not going to want to connect to there. What you'll find is the skid steer will release, and if you take those two attachment hoses and try to plug the male and the female together on the attachment side, they won't plug together. So that's probably our #1 problem we see. And then generally you have to bleed off some oil off that attachment and it'll connect right up as long as all your couplers are in good condition. So that's kind of a real quick rundown of how we take care of these couplers and how we help out. So as you can see, pretty basic stuff. If you have any questions on these couplers, let's say, are they worth rebuilding? Can you repair them? You can comment. We'd be happy to help you out. We generally don't try to repair them because they're not a real expensive part, and we can usually help customers get better life out of them if they are experiencing issues. So generally we replace them just to give you better tolerances with new couplers. The faces are smooth, they're not beat up from debris hitting them or attachments hitting them. So there is other things to discuss there. But long story short, if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us, comment on this video. Let us know if there's anything else you'd like to know about these couplers or this system. And we'd be happy to make a video or get you some answers on that. So we appreciate you hanging out, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.